sugar. Oh, honey, honey, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you.
Welcome back. I'm Kristen from Frosted Bake Shop, and we are going to the sweet shop today to decorate some cookies. We're going to be decorating some donuts and popsicles and cupcakes and ice cream cones. We're going to take a quick minute to make sure that you have everything in your cookie kit, and then we'll get started. Before we jump into that, I want to make sure that everybody has what they need to get started. If you have done this class before and you've already set up your station the way we talked about in the last class, go ahead and move forward. If you've done the last class but maybe need a refresher, or if you're brand new to cookie decorating, take a minute now, pause this video and jump over to the other video I have posted that shows you how to set up your workstation, how to cut your icing bags. Don't forget that before you start cutting them, you should massage them for just a couple minutes to each one to make sure that they have mixed in properly, that the colors haven't settled while they've sat, especially if you've let your kit sit in the refrigerator overnight or even for a couple days. They tend to separate a little bit. So take a minute now, make sure your station is set up. If it is, great. Double check, make sure that we have everything in our kit. First thing that's in this week's kit is this little container that we have our cherry for the top of our cupcake. And some sprinkles to decorate some of our cookies. You should have your toothpick. There will be a couple of them to use. You'll have your 8 decorating cookies. There'll be 4 shapes, 2 of each shape. And then I do throw in 2 bonus cookies. In this week's kit, it's actually going to be 2 little candy shaped cookies because you can't go to your sweet shop without getting a couple pieces of candy. The last thing that you're gonna have is your bags of icing. You will have your tan for your cookies. You'll have your pink, white, and brown. These are all flooding consistency, which means that once you start piping them, they're gonna run a little bit to smooth out. You'll also have 1 bag of a detailing icing, which is a little bit thicker, so that you can go back and pipe your details, and that will hold its shape a little bit better. So if you have yourself set up, you're ready to go, let's jump into decorating our cookies. Now I'd like to add a quick flooding lesson. The first thing you're going to do is start on the outside of whatever shape you're working on. You're going to pick a point and start piping around the outside of your shape. Being careful not to get too close so that it spills out on the outside of your cookie. I'm going to go and turn my cookie sideways just so that you can see it a little bit better. Notice how my piping bag is not touching my cookie. It's just directing where that icing is going to land. Now we're going to fill in the center of our shape. We're going to start by piping another row of icing a little bit thicker, adding more pressure around that outline that we just did. If it doesn't hit that outline, it's not a problem because we can go back and fix it. We're going to do another row or 2 to get the outside filled in. We'll start filling in the inside by making a cross mark, which gives us smaller windows to fill in. Then go back and fill in each of these smaller windows with enough icing that you don't have too much bare cookie still showing. Again, we're going to use our tool to go back and even out our icing and make sure we get rid of any little air bubbles that might be in there. I start with my edges and go around the entire outside of my cookie or my area that I have flooded. then work on my middle to make sure there's no air bubbles or uneven spots. You can then give your cookie a little shake and even a couple taps against your table to make sure that it's even. And now you're ready to work on your cookie kit. So today's lesson, we're going to the sweet shop. Today's decorating will include 4 different shapes of cookies. We have our popsicle, our donut, our cupcake, and our ice cream cone. And with each of those shapes, we're going to do 2 different decorating designs. One of the things along with our decorating that I would like to talk about and have you guys to learn as a skill today is your decorating planning. And what I mean by that is whenever I start working on any of my cookie designs, I sort of sketch them out and figure out what colors and what parts of my cookies I need to worry about decorating first, because there's some parts that are naturally going to need to set up before you can go back and do your detail work. There's other things like this area of frosting for your donut that you're going to want to add your sprinkles while your icing is still wet, but you're not going to want to do that after you have decorated the donut part, because you don't want to take the chance that your sprinkles start sticking to that outer brown donut part. You really want them to just stick on the frosting. So when we're decorating today, you'll see how I jump from cookie to cookie, section to section, with the intention that you're giving some of those earlier parts time to set up, to firm up, before you go back and take the chance of ruining those particular areas. So before you start decorating your cookies, you want to make sure that all your bags, you've gone ahead, massage them all to make sure that your colors are not separated. You're going to cut all the tips off your bags. Test them on those practice cookies that I've included in your kit to make sure that the tips are the right size. Again, remember, we'd rather have them too small and have to recut them than cut them too large and have way too much frosting on our cookies. Once we're all at that place, we can start decorating our cookies. The first cookie that we're going to start with today is our cupcake cookie. We're going to want to start with our sectioned off portions of frosting, and we're going to alternate these to make sure that they dry in between. We're going to just follow along the outside. Now, this is eventually going to have 3 sections. Right now, we're only going to worry about decorating the very top of the swirl, and we're going to do the bottom. The reason we're doing that is because we want these to firm up before we go back and do some of our detailing. The other reason we're doing this is because we want to see some definition in our actual swirl. If we were to go ahead and pipe all 3 sections, they really would just run into each other and look like one big mound of frosting on our cupcake, which would be fine. It's not a big deal, but for a little bit more interest, we want to have 3 distinct sections. So again, we just started with the outline, and these, because they're such a unique shape, I kind of just filled in. And you can use your toothpick to go ahead and spread it out. Our next cupcake is going to be our chocolate frosted cupcake. This one, we're going to add some sprinkles. So this is when we talked about our planning, this is where it becomes important. We're going to do our very top swirl first. Now, whenever you do decorations, you actually want your frosting to set up for just a few seconds before you go ahead and sprinkle something or place something on it. When you first pipe out frosting, it actually is so liquidy that whatever you put in it is going to sink into it and almost become flattened with it. This cupcake, we're actually gonna add one of our decorative little cherries to the top, but for the same reason, I didn't wanna go ahead and put that cherry on too early. So I'm gonna just keep that there to keep in mind that I wanna go ahead and place that cherry probably three cookies in. I'm gonna take care of that. The next cookie, the reason that I'm not adding this bottom part is I do wanna add my sprinkles before I do this. So we're gonna move on to our next cookie, which is gonna be our ice cream cookie. We're gonna do tops of the ice cream and then go back and flood our cones and add our detailing. We're gonna do a strawberry and vanilla swirl with a hot fudge topping. So we're gonna use that same brown bag, and the hot fudge on top of this one is gonna have some sprinkles. So when we do this, hot fudge is sort of gooey. So we're gonna kind of do some interesting dripping. And we'll go along the outside again. So that is my hot fudge topping. I'm gonna just take my toothpick, spread it around in case there's any air bubbles. Make sure that you're wiping your toothpick in between so that we don't go back to a color like the white. Now, cookies in, I'm gonna add my cute little cherry royal icing transfer. Don't be too worried about exactly where you're gonna go ahead and put that, as long as it's stuck on your icing. Now we're gonna add our sprinkles. Now remember how I said the reason we do this is because we don't wanna take the chance of it going into other parts of our cookie. So I'm gonna just make sure that my sprinkles are on that section so that when I pipe other things, they don't get stuck in there. Now that we've done our sprinkles, we're gonna go ahead and do our other sections for our cookies. So we're gonna go back to our cupcake, which is gonna be a full chocolate frosting, but we wanna leave that middle section. So we're gonna start right where that indentation, and I'm going about halfway down this bump. I do my outline, and this one I'm gonna go straight across, just so it's a little different. I think it's important when you do a set that they look cohesive, but you don't want them all to be exactly the same. And I'm gonna take my toothpick and just swirl my icing to make sure that there's no air bubbles and that it's even on my cupcake. So we have our frosting for our 2 cupcakes, the 2 portions done. Now we're gonna jump to our 2 ice cream cones. So we're gonna leave this middle section and we're gonna do strawberry ice cream on the bottom. Now for this one, I'm actually going to outline the bottom of my ice cream first. And the way I'm gonna do that is I'm gonna do like 3 sort of bumps. And remember when we talked about doing borders and outlines, we're not gonna worry about touching the cookie the whole time. We don't wanna do that. We actually wanna put pressure on our bag and just drape the icing. gonna move on to our second ice cream cone. Now this one is going to be our chocolate chip. So we're gonna flood it all in white, but again, we're going to do it in sections so that you can clearly see there's a couple scoops on that ice cream. But before they set up, we wanna make sure we add our chocolate chips. So for this one, I'm gonna do our top section first. And again, when you have an ice cream scooped, it's kind of wavy. So I do my outer outline, kind of go around one time, second time, and then I go ahead and fill in. Just a little bit of pressure on the bag. Now it's going to be important here that you get your chocolate chips in an interesting way. They don't all have to be perfect squares or perfectly shaped, because when you get ice cream, that's not what it will really look like. So we want to spread them out so there's not too many, and we want them all in kind of unique, different shapes. So they can be sort of squares, curved. Make sure they're kind of going in different directions. And you can use your tool if you want. If you think that it doesn't look the way you want it to, you can kind of play with it a little bit, pull it. So the next cookie that we're going to be working on is our donuts. And there's our little trick that we just make sure that we're always working on the cookies closest to us. We're not reaching our bag and dripping over things that we've done. So our first donut that we want to work on is going to be our strawberry frosted donut. We really are going to just pipe sort of 5 sort of wavy lines to outline. The inside of our donut, we really are just going to follow the shape. Now, I don't like how much cookie is showing there, so I'm going to go back, and you can see I'm just going to add a little bit of icing on the inside so that it closes that gap. I really don't want to see the inside of that cookie as much as I did. Now we're going to go back, and we're going to follow that outline that we had. I'm gonna do the chocolate icing before I work on my sprinkles, because I don't want them all to just sink right into that icing. I want them to sort of rest on top. So my chocolate, I'm gonna do the same way. Just think about sort of doing 5 interesting curves. So the first thing that we're gonna do is our strawberry popsicle. And I thought it would be cute just to make this set a little bit more whimsical to do some polka dots on here. It's not necessarily a real popsicle that you're gonna see, but I always think that polka dots are a cute way to add some detail. And when we outline, we wanna leave it pretty jagged because somebody took a bite out. When we add our polka dots, we're going to start with 3 evenly spaced dots at the bottom. Then we're going to move up and do 2 evenly spaced dots in between. You're going to continue this until you fill all the space. Noticing at the top, you're going to do less dots in those smaller areas. And when these set up for a little bit longer, we'll come back and add the piping for the sticks. But I think that looks pretty cute. So when we do our next one, we're actually gonna do a fudgicle. And we're gonna make this look a little interesting by actually putting a little bit of white where you would have bitten into this. The first thing I wanna do is do my full outline of my chocolate. But I'm gonna do the bite part further back than I did this one. That'll leave my room for my white. And then when I go back for my second round, I'll pipe that white when this sets up a little bit. Now we're gonna add our sprinkles to our strawberry donut. And you can shake any off that. This one I don't like how it's come off. So I'm just gonna scooch it back on the strawberry. And this one in the center, I'm actually gonna pull off. Now we're gonna go back and we're gonna do our detailing for our vanilla drizzle. You're gonna just pipe straight lines and then kind of come to a curve. When you get to this part, you can stop and then sort of just imagine where it would go across that opening. And I think that looks delicious. We're gonna let these set up for about 20 minutes and then come back and start adding our detailing. Now we've let our cookies set up for about 20-25 minutes. If you didn't have that time to give your cookies a minute to rest, that's totally fine. Just be cautious when you're handling your cookies, whether you've let them sit for 20 minutes or not. They're firmed up, but they're not completely set up that if you touch them, your finger will still go into that icing and cause a mark. So we're gonna go back and start filling in those sections that we have previously left open. The first one obviously is going to be our cupcake cookies. We're going to start with our vanilla frosting. And we're going to just start on the outsides, following the bumps that the cookie is already giving us. Now, if you see you have a little bit of a gap, don't worry about it. You can use your toothpick to go back and fix it. Now, if you notice, I'm adding pretty firm pressure. I do want that icing to be pretty built up so that it has a little bit of a puffy look to it. And now we're gonna just go around our edges. And this is where, if it didn't run naturally in, just use your toothpick to pull it so that there's no blank spaces. So there's the top of our cupcake. Now moving on to our chocolate. Now, while we're already working on our cupcakes, we're going to do the bottom wrapping. This first one I'm gonna do in pink. And I'm gonna add some white polka dots for interest. So we're gonna wanna do our outline, flood the center, and add our polka dots fairly quickly. So now when I add my polka dots, I'm gonna go ahead and evenly space out 3 dots to begin in the first row. I'll then add a second row of 2 dots, making sure they fall right in between the first row, and then I'll continue with the next row. And now our chocolate cupcake, I'm actually gonna do stripes. I want the majority of my wrapper to be white. So I'm gonna flood that entirely in white. And we're just making sure that our icing is even. And then I'm going to use my pink icing to make my stripes. You can go up and down, side to side, thick, thin, lots of them. I'm going to do horizontal. Now the trick with this is you just tap the end of your bag to sort of start and stop. Oop. To Just pick up where you left off if that happens to you. Not a problem. And you'll see those will start to blend in. And again, you can make them thicker, thinner. If you wanted thicker stripes, I would just do 2 lines of icing next to each other so that they sort of melt into each other. Now we're gonna move on to our ice cream cones. We're gonna fill in our sections here. So the first one we're gonna do is that vanilla scoop in the middle. And again, you kind of want it wavy because remember, this is very natural. Now with my hot fudge, I'm just sort of going up against it, not so much on top of it. And then I'll go back and fill in. And this is, if it didn't run into that other color, just use your toothpick and do that. Okay, so now I have my scoops there. Now I'm gonna do the same thing with my chocolate chip ice cream. I think that looks pretty good. And again, if you don't like the shape of your chips for any reason, you can go ahead and sort of play with that. For our ice cream cone. So we're gonna just start on the outside like a triangle. Sort of follow the curve of your ice cream. The reason I do those outlines first is so that they set up just a second so that when I start doing so much icing on the inside, it doesn't run off my cookie. Now we're gonna work on our donuts. We're gonna just do that outside actual donut portion. And you don't even have to worry too much about so I'm gonna just wanna do one row around the outside. Now, if you have segments that you can't fit it, that's totally fine. Just stop where your frosting reaches the outside. And then we're gonna go back and just fill in. I'm gonna turn this just so you guys can see. Because of all those wavy lines, you're probably gonna have to use your tool to sort of pull to make sure it all meets together. Moving on to our popsicles, you're just gonna wanna take the tip of that icing and start at the bottom and follow where the stick is. And that one you do want to be careful and make sure you don't put too much icing on, because that shape is so small that it will have a tendency to run right off of that little stick part. If it does, it's not the end of the world. Just use a toothpick or paper towel or the edge of your finger to wipe it. That's fine. Now, we talked about how we wanted to show the inside of our fudgesicle. I'm gonna start using my detailing icing to do that, because I don't want it to sink down into my fudgesicle. You can use your flood for the cookie part that's exposed. So this is my flood icing that I'm just gonna do like one line here, so it looks like, and then maybe fill in some of that empty space, so it looks like we have a bite. So that's the inside. What I also want it to look like is that my vanilla ice cream that's on the inside has started to melt. So what I'm gonna do to have it make it look like it's melting, I'm gonna use that detailing icing so it's thicker and just kind of do some drips. And you can kind of make them wavy. You can do as many as you want, as few. But you just want it to kind of look like that ice cream is melting out. So now your 4 cookies at your bottom, your 2 donuts, your 2 popsicles are done. So we're gonna go back and continue to work on some of the detailing. What I wanna add for a little bit of interest for my cupcakes is some detailing on my wrappers, as well as some detailing up on the top of the frosting. So the first thing we'll do is let's do our detailing on our icing. So we're gonna just add some swirls to have this look interesting. When you're doing swirling, to have some interest in your cupcake topping, you wanna kind of make sure that your swirls are going in some different directions. When you do this, if you wanna practice on your practice cookies separate, that might be a good idea just so that you can get the hang of it. And this is truly the situation where you're just letting your icing drop onto your cookie and you're using the top of your icing bag as a guide. I'm gonna start sort of in the center of this side, just touching the icing. And I'm gonna let it loop around. And then I'm gonna go the opposite direction here. Okay? Now the middle section is gonna be much softer because that's the most recent one. So just be cautious when you're touching your bag down. We're gonna start, go counterclockwise. And this one we're gonna swirl back up towards itself. Next one on the other side, we're gonna do the opposite. So we're gonna start first in the center, go clockwise, and then again swirl back up on itself. And this is really just to add some visually interesting texture to your cookie so that it's not so flat and all one color. Now to add some detail to the bottom, I'm gonna make those marks, lines, to have it look like the paper cups, how they have the ridges. So I'm gonna do one on each side. Following the edge of the cupcake. I'm gonna do one down the center. And then I'm gonna divide each side in half. But these lines I'm gonna do more at an angle. So that one will slant in towards the middle. And again, this one will slant more in towards the middle. Just so it has some texture. Now that cookie is done. So now we're gonna do the same thing at the bottom. Because we added sprinkles up here, I'm not gonna add any texture to the top of my cupcake. So the outsides, center, slant one in towards the middle, slant the other one in towards the middle. Now that one's done. We're gonna skip this one because our top is pretty interesting already. And we're gonna add some of those texture lines to our chocolate chip. So I'm gonna start on the left side and I'm gonna go start in the center, go counterclockwise, follow the outside curve and come in. Now this one I'm gonna actually start at where the other one left off.
And again, you're gonna wanna pipe counterclockwise.
And now this one, I'm gonna start in this corner and I'm gonna go clockwise so that it meets the one that's already there. Now the top, I'm gonna do similar to this one, so it runs right around the top. So we start sort of a center point, clockwise, follow the outside of your cookie, and again, it's just to add another dimension to your cookie so the whole thing isn't just so flat. The last thing we're gonna do to put the finishing touches on our cookies is to add the hash mark lines on our ice cream cone bottoms. So this is the flood icing that we've been using, which means that it's going to be a little bit runny when you pipe it. So you want to make sure that your lines are not too thick to start with, because they're going to blend out and get even larger. You're going to start with the bottom of this bump here, follow the pattern of your line here. So these are all going to be parallel to the side of your ice cream cone. And then you're going to want to start in this side and again follow the opposite direction. Now, if something like that happens, it's not the end of the world. And we're going to do this cookie. And that just gives it that raised effect that an ice cream cone would have. So I hope everybody enjoyed their time with us today. I know I certainly had a lot of fun decorating these Sweet Shop cookies. Please come back and join us another day. Thank you.
Sugar, oh honey, honey, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting